Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Vegas Legal Magazine podcast. I'm Mark Fierro with Vegas Legal Magazine publisher Tyler Morgan and Fierro Communications Vice President Jeff Haney. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you had a chance to watch or listen to our last podcast on Golden Knights owner Bill Foley's special foundation, the Folded Flag Foundation. Foley, the owner of the Las Vegas Golden Knights, created the Folded Flag Foundation to support our Gold Star families who have lost a spouse, a parent, keep the family moving forward with scholarship money and other assets. Today, Tom Rankin, Operations Manager at the Folded Flag Foundation, returns the podcast along with Gold Star family member Courtney Retzer Vargo. She is the surviving spouse of U.S. Navy SEAL Tom Retzer, who was killed in action while serving in Afghanistan in June of 2003. Courtney and Tom Retzer were raising two young children at the time of his death. Tom and Courtney, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Courtney, the day that you learn of your husband's death, what do you think is going to happen to your family? Everything has to come sailing at you all at once, I would imagine.
Yes and no. And he was an excellent operator, and of course you think will never happen to him. It will never happen to our family, but with the reality of war, it was something that we had discussed as a family and as a couple, and we did have a plan in place, although, it was intended to go in the bottom of the drawer, and we were never going to need that until we did.
How many deployments was he on?
Many, many, many.
Too many to count in this.
Many.
Yeah. We were talking, and America, it seems, has always been at war since even before 9/11. And to back up a bit, what was your life like with these constant deployments and knowing that he was not just in harm's way, he was the tip of the spear?
Mm-hmm. I think it was something that I, as his spouse, grew into. I thought I knew what I was getting myself into when we married, when I was 19 and he was 24. Very young couple. But, when we got married, it was pre 9/11. And so the idea was, God forbid, should something to happen to him in training, that was really the more, at the time, the more real danger. And then 9/11 happened and everything changed. And I went to too many funerals to count. So, in fact, when Tom was killed, his teammate that had been killed just prior to him, I went to go get a card, bereavement card, for my friend who had just lost her husband, and there were no cards in our neighborhood for bereavement. The section at Hallmark was totally empty, and because of the previous death. And I thought, I better buy a bereavement card now because it's going to happen again. And I was buying my own bereavement card. So, and it didn't stop. When Tom died, 2 months later, there was another, and then there was another and another. And our small community of Naval Special Warfare has now had well over 100 combat deaths. And that's too many. But of course, our story is not unusual anymore. The story of my family, the story of of the SEAL community, it's unfortunately far too common across all military branches. And the Folded Flag Foundations really does such a wonderful service because they don't limit their assistance to enlisted versus officer or just one branch of the military. It's equal opportunity assistance for everyone, and no one else is doing that. No one has been doing that.
When you lost your husband, was there like a list of services that you could contact or that would contact you to sort of kind of just guide you to some kind of assistance? Nothing? No,
wouldn't that be great? I think there are certainly a lot more opportunities for resources now. But no, when Tom was killed in 2003, this was we were 2 months into Iraq, and it's just a short time after 9/11. They were still cleaning up the hole that was the middle of Manhattan. This was a very different environment, and I think there were a lot of benevolent organizations that were popping up and trying to kind of fill in the gap between where military and government assistance would leave off, and where the private sector could help fill in those gaps. But it was not enough for our family, so it was a real challenge for a long time.
How do you ultimately end up becoming involved with Folded Flag? How did that process work?
Oh, years later, I myself and the boys had relocated from the East Coast to Las Vegas, which was to become our adopted home. And my oldest was in early high school, and my youngest was in early junior high. And they both needed something different than what their local public school could offer them. And that meant private school. And by this time, I had graduated with my own degree, and I had a career. But it's still, it's not enough to carry 2 private school tuitions. And I was speaking with a couple of other organizations, one of which is the Navy SEAL Foundation. And they suggested that I talk with Folded Flag, and that they may be able to offer some assistance with K through 12, which again is a really unusual element of the Folded Flag's charter, which is to help get kids to college. I think there's a lot of focus on college for Gold Star kids, which is wonderful, but not all kids are cut out for a 4-year degree or have the interest in a career that requires a 4-year degree. And there's a lot of years between when their father is lost and getting admitted to college. Those are a lot of years that the surviving spouse and the surviving parent has to help get that kid prepared to be ready to go to college. So that was my challenge, and spoke with Folded Flag, and they were there to help. No questions asked. It was a really easy process, and I have to say that most military families are used to rolling with the punches, and if they come up against the inevitable challenge, they just handle it. They manage it. This is how we're raised, and that mindset doesn't end when our service member is no longer with us. We continue to roll with it, and we make it work, and we handle it ourselves. So to ask for assistance, particularly financial assistance, even for a really important and valuable thing as school tuition, it's fairly humiliating, to be honest. But Folded Flag made it very easy, and it didn't feel that way at all.
You got that 1,000 times more coming, as far as I'm concerned. There's nothing charitable about it, I don't think. We owe you a tremendous debt of gratitude. There would not be a United States without our veterans. At what point do you go, I got this? I know you went on for your education and that part. Tell us about it. At what point where you wake up and you go, wait a second, this is going to work somehow?
I'll let you know when it happens.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
Grief. I think there's this idea that grief expires in a year. The first year, there's so much focus, right? And then after a year, you should be all better, or you should be moving on, or over it. Whatever phrase comes to mind, we've probably heard them all. But that isn't true. Grief sometimes softens and shifts, and I think sometimes it reemerges sharp as ever. And I definitely think that's true for our kids. They will revisit their own grief and the process of having lost that parent as they reach typical milestones throughout their life. And as their surviving parent, part of my job is to anticipate that and be ready to weather the storm with them when they have a setback.
Is there a sense of, do they understand the sense of heroism, that aura of heroism that the rest of us put around people like your husband?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not lost on them. They definitely understand what kind of a man their dad was. Part of that is my challenge, has been to make sure that they understand that, yes, he was this larger than life character, and yes, he was not built like most people, but he also was a normal human being, and he had strengths and flaws just like anyone. And the realness of who their dad was has been a major priority for me. I want them to remember and think of their dad, not just the warrior, because he was both. He was both things.
And they have the boys have gone on to really stabilize in their academic studies and really find a home, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm very proud of both my boys. They're very different people, but they both are good people with integrity, and yeah, their dad would be very proud.
Do any of them have any interest or inclination of serving at any level in military, or
Yes,
whether after college or during college or anything? Yeah.
Yeah, they both have discussed it at different times in their lives, and in fact, my youngest right now is a senior in high school and is completing the process as an applicant to the U.S. Naval Academy.
For him.
Yeah.
Something tells me, sounds like it's got success written all over it. So when you look at your experience, everything that you went through, do you find yourself, do you ever have occasion to counsel other Gold Star survivors?
Sure. I think, when Tom was killed, it was so early in the war, and those of us that found ourselves in this position were fairly isolated from one another. And I just wanted to talk to another young widow. I wanted the handbook. I wanted the how-to, because if I'm a widow, then I'm going to be the best widow there could be, and I'm going to make sure that I educate myself on how to be the best widow. And of course, there is no handbook; it doesn't work that way. But in my pursuit to try to figure out how to do this the best way possible, I had the good fortune to connect with other surviving spouses who were in the same position and relatively early in their process as well. And through that, I think I learned as much of what to do as what not to do. And that was incredibly helpful for me. And in large part just to know that I wasn't alone, and that all of these crazy mixed up feelings I was having were probably pretty normal, and that there was someone else who had experienced it as well.
What not to do. Let's hear about what not to
What
do.
not to do.
In retrospect, now that you've learned this life experience, what is it that you...
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to know that everyone has their own process, and that grief is not linear, and to be kind to yourself, because you're going to make mistakes and have setbacks and find yourself looking for course correction, and that's totally okay. And I think that's an important example to set for your kids and for your other family members who are grieving as well. But I think most importantly, you cannot let grief and anger take over your life and make your world small and fearful and angry. That's not what Tom would have wanted for me. And I feel really strongly that we have this life, and we have to figure out how to use it to make the world a little better. And for me, that means checking in with myself periodically. Am I on the right track? Am I using my life the way I should be using it? And maybe even to take that one step further, am I using my life in a way that Tom would be proud?
Courtney mentioned that at one point she was hesitant to reach out for help, maybe because she didn't want it to look like she was just asking for help. Is that a dynamic that you see frequently with the foundation? Because even though I know what you're saying, I would hope not, because we're talking about the most genuine, true heroes that this country has. But is that something you have to deal with occasionally?
I do. Not all the time, but we do see some of that. There are some people that don't know who we are. We haven't been out there that long, and so there's sometimes some reluctance to that. And plus, people just have their pride and want to sustain on their own and not feel like they're a burden to someone.
Yeah, this is the exact opposite of that spectrum. That these are not people that are looking to be dependent on anybody, right, by their very nature.
Well, you think about, you alluded to the number of deployments. So you think about these families, the member of the families overseas on deployments over and over, you couldn't even count. And so the family develops an independence of sorts, and that's an adjustment too, I think, for families when they're not on deployment. You kind of got to restructure how your family operates. I hear that from people, and then but they have that independent spirit. So I don't know, you could probably comment on that when that soldier or SEAL or whoever's home, there's an adjustment for having them home.
Absolutely. And every branch and of the service is a little bit different. But for Tom, he would be gone and home in such an unpredictable fashion that you can't have your husband and the dad come home and not have a role in everyday life. And we got really good at, when he was home, he slid right in and changed diapers and, would take the kids to t-ball practice and get up with the baby in the middle of the night. And then when he had to go, I just picked up the slack, and that was typical for us. So, and I think because of that, it can sometimes delay the effects of grief. They're gone, they're not coming back, but every day-to-day life, you can easily tell yourself that he's just on deployment, and that someday soon, 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, he'll walk through the door with his bags. But at some point, you have to come to terms with the fact that that's not going to happen, and figure out what life is going to look like for you and the kids moving forward without him.
I would imagine that would be one of the toughest parts, coming to the point of focus, that you understand this is real and it is forever, and whatever plan you're putting down has to be this is the way it's going to be, right?
Right. You roll with it.
What are the things that are, if you could wave a magic wand, what are the things that the foundation or the rest of America would be doing for families that just lost someone, given your years of experience? What is it that you would have them do? Us do.
Well, that's a really big question. I think that there's something called the SBP DIC offset that needs to be corrected in the legislature. There are certain benefits that the U.S. government has allocated to surviving spouses and Gold Star children. And unfortunately, one comes from discretionary funds and the other comes from non-discretionary. And the rule since 9/11 has been that one benefit offsets the other, so it essentially eclipses it. The second issue would be that there was recently some tax reform. And so what very meager benefits come on a monthly basis to a minor Gold Star child that are intended for housing, food, transportation, education, those other things, those day-to-day kinds of expenses, suddenly went from being taxed at an appropriate level to 37%, which essentially eliminates it. So, we have some work to do. I think the U.S. government does a much, much better job at taking care of veterans and Gold Star families as compared to the Vietnam era. But we still have a lot of work to do. and there are some pretty significant gaps that need to be addressed by our lawmakers.
Yeah, it always seems like everyone, like, at least at the government level, it's always a financial concern that we need to have more money for these families, more money for the veterans. But it sounds like where this foundation kind of comes in is they come in on more of the human element, and they can actually bring somebody in there to meet with the family and sort of actually kind of guide them and talk to them. And that's probably more valuable at times than just the couple $100 for this, like sometimes they just need somebody to talk to that they can relate to. And what do I do with these kids? What's my next step? And it sounds like foundations like the Folded Flag and maybe some others is maybe where the starting point could be, and maybe the like the future of the platform for the government to step in and kind of create more of these services. Yeah.
Yeah, especially with politicians, too often it's a lot of lip service, but not actually taking action the way a foundation like
I think
this does.
a lot of politicians are concerned about, did I move enough money over toward veteran affairs, and not how the money's being used and utilized.
I can tell you this, that if you ever want to look at, and I'm not going to get all political on you here, but I worked on Capitol Hill for 6 years. If you want to find out who's out to screw the veterans, all you have to do is read the name of the bill, and if the name of the bill is Help Our Veterans More Than Ever, that's the bill that's going to cut veterans' benefits. The same people that are the first ones to say go to war are the last ones to support our veterans. And I think it would be nothing for Congress to pass a formulaic equation that says if you're going to put $500 million, which would be the smallest war that we ever went into ever, then this is the ratio that you're going to have to put up for veterans, every single veteran that's injured, every single veteran that's lost. Because why is it that the people who have equity, who put up the time, who put up their lives, who look their wives in the eye and say, I might not be back, but this is what we do, that they're not already accounted for if something goes sideways, that it's not already part of the law? To me, that doesn't make any sense. And we don't even do $1 trillion wars anymore. Every war that we get into means 10 years and $1 or $2 or $3 trillion. So when anybody starts talking about going to war, and believe me, I believe in our defense, but you got to remember, it's not when you get in. You're talking about 2030 when you get out, and 2035 when you get out, and the 40 years after that veterans and their families, sometimes it takes the rest of their lives to be cared for. It's simply the case. It simply is the case. That's why these costs are as high as they are. You run a very small crew at the foundation, don't you, given that this is a national?
Yes.
Tell us about the size of it, and it sounds like you do an impressive job with a very small core. Sounds like smaller than the hockey team will ever be. Half of a hockey team.
We do have a small staff, but we all work well together, and we all will do whatever task is needed. So we'll mix up travel, who needs to go here, who can stay back and do this, whatever's going on. There's always quite a bit going on. And I think that's something that's, and you've seen this, I'm sure, with groups that help. Everybody tends to do a lot. I was at Fort Bragg recently, and, with the Special Forces station there, and 82nd Airborne, these kind of groups, they're always active, and that's a big population of soldiers' families. And so the group at their base, to give you an example, and to what you were talking about, they're supporting 1,800 families that have been stationed there since 9/11. There's 4 people trying to help those 1,800 families. So, they would like to have a bigger staff, but it's money.
So, speaking of money, how do people give to the foundation? I know that, first of all, give the website. Let's talk about that for the person that wants to learn more about how to help.
Mm-hmm. So you can go to our website. It's foldedflagfoundation.org, O-R-G. You can go there, and it'll direct you where to apply for a scholarship or to donate. Until we meet Courtney and hear about her sons Owen and Leaf, these are,
ideas. They're just, we know that they're out there, and we know that we want to help, but we don't know of this story and how to help and how much it does help when it's correctly applied. Give us a thumbnail because I think your story is, it's just wonderful because you were able to, as we spoke before, get the plan, keep the plan, tear up the plan, go back to the plan, but you made your own way. Tell us about, because your life is a success. I want to hear this. I want everybody to know because you did what you did.
Sorry, which part?
All of it, your education, all of it, and being able to keep all of this together, because this is not somebody that's slinking off to go into the weeds and say, me, oh my.
Yeah, of course. So, I think like a lot of military spouses, I was trying to further my education and achieve my own, in my case, professional goals, while also supporting my husband's career and his service. And that meant a couple of moves and some disruption to my own education, and that was okay. That was part of our plan, and something that as a team and as a family, we knew that that was going to be a challenge, and it was one that we readily took on. So when he was killed, I was in night school, plugging away at my undergrad degree. And I left all that behind for about 6 months, and was just trying to take care of my little family and kind of getting our feet underneath of us again. And about the turn of that next year is when I realized, it's time to start putting a routine in place, and I need to set some goals for myself and therefore for my boys moving forward. And so I went back to school and got an undergrad degree, and then went on to grad school. And then, even though I said I wouldn't do it, I went on for my doctoral degree as well. And my hope is that, it did a couple of things. One is that it afforded me the kind of lifestyle that I knew I could give a comfortable life to my boys. And it allowed me to be at home with them every night and not working a couple of jobs to try to make ends meet. And I think too, I hope that it showed my boys that even when you are in the thick of it and it's hard to get out of bed in the morning, that you got to put one foot in front of the other and figure out what comes next, and what drive and perseverance can achieve. And that may look different for them. It may not be higher education. It might be. It probably will be. But I hope that that's a lesson that they take with them as they move forward. And then finally, I wanted to, as I said earlier, I wanted to make sure that what I spent my professional life doing was something that was giving back to my community. I think there's a lot of ways to serve your community. One of the most admirable and also most difficult is serving your country in the military, but that's not an option for everyone. And I think we all have a role to play. And it might not be in the service, but we can help by supporting those who are serving.
And tell us about your sons. Tell us, because it sounds, at least from what I've heard, that they have moved ahead in life and they've done some wonderful things for themselves.
Yeah, they're both really, they're young men now. They're 21 and 18, and I have one at home, one who's been living independently for the last couple of years, and they are different people, but also very similar in the sense that they root for the underdog, both have strong integrity, and just good people, and they make me proud.
Well, you make us proud, and we thank you for the sacrifices that you've made for this country. And that is heartfelt. And with that, we call it a day, the Vegas Legal Magazine podcast. I want to sincerely thank you, Gold Star family member Courtney Retzer Vargo and Tom Rankin, Operations Manager of the Folded Flag Foundation. Tyler Morgan, publisher of Vegas Legal Magazine, and Jeff Haney, Vice President of Fierro Communications. Remember to like, share the Vegas Legal Magazine podcast on Facebook. Also catch us on YouTube, iTunes, or Stitcher. And for all of you out there with a story idea, an axe to grind, get a hold of Vegas Legal, the leading magazine in Southern Nevada legal market. You can call Tyler at
702-222-3476.
reach out. Tell your friends. Have a good one. We're out of here.